Welcome to the Bergen Forum. Thank you for coming. Thank you, people on Zoom. Just a couple of announcements. First announcement, this morning, Liz Truss resigned as the British Prime Minister, the fourth Prime Minister to be kicked out in the last 6 years, none of them elected, none of them by the decision of the electorate. Just thought I'd mention that. Tonight, there's a Division of Ceramic Art opening reception at 6 o'clock in Harder. And next Tuesday is the Lefkowitz lecture in Nevins here at 5:30. And Jonathan Karp from the University of Birmingham will be giving a talk on Jewish and Jewish-owned venues for Black music in New York City. Next week's Bergen Forum is very interesting. It's a Bergen Forum first. Susan Morehouse and Lynn O'Connell, with their dogs Jam and Blue, will be giving a talk entitled, "Is there a dog tour in the house?" It's about therapy animals, therapy dogs. Today, we're really happy to have Ted Forsyth. Ted Forsyth is a philosophy graduate from Alfred University. And he's now back as an adjunct professor of criminal justice. And he's going to give a talk on the power of foil. So, Ted, take it away. No,
or is it the other one? Okay. Hello, is this thing on? Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, good, good. I'm told if I don't talk into the microphone, the Zoom people will not hear me. So I'm going to talk like this the whole time. Kidding. Let's see if this clicker works. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, there we go. Okay, who am I? This is nice. I can walk around. I can do this. Oh, that's a picture of me. My friend took that. So yeah, I'm an adjunct professor of criminal justice here at Alfred. I graduated in 2003. I'm also a consultant for police accountability. I've done work with Geneva, Rochester, and I've fielded emails and calls from other cities in the country. My friend Barbara Lacker-Ware and I wrote a report called The Case for an Independent Police Accountability System that called for the creation of a police accountability board with 5 pillars. That meant, disciplinary power, independent investigations, agency of city government, transparency, subpoena power, all these fun things that you don't see in civilian review boards around the country. I tend to focus on systemic change, not individual issues, although those are important, certainly. That's a part of accountability, so don't discount them either. And I was an anti-police brutality activist with a group called Enough is Enough in Rochester, and a journalist for many years with Rochester Indie Media. I still have access to that website, but I haven't published in a while, which is all right. So we're going to talk about FOIL. FOIL stands for the Freedom of Information Law. It's an open records law that was, it's in New York State here. And it's probably somewhat important to explain why FOIL, why I even went down this rabbit hole to understand sort of what existed in terms of opportunity to find information. So this over here, I'm going to walk over here again, excuse me. Oh, this video still is terrible. This is my friend Emily Good. She's holding a banner that says "Cut War Spending." This is in 2009, and it was tax day. She had gone up the tree about 40 feet outside the IRS and was holding the banner for 2 hours when the police came, surrounded the tree, and said if she didn't get down right now, they were going to mental health arrest her. And so Emily, being Emily, decided to stay in the tree, which led to 2 fire trucks, 3 cops on a ladder, pepper spraying her 40 feet in the air, clutching a tree, and then dragging her down the ladder to the ground. At which point I said some inappropriate things and then found myself in handcuffs. So go figure, right? And, being a white man, I was outraged that my right to First Amendment was not upheld by the police. And how could this happen to me? And I don't understand what's going on. And, I was naive, I was young, I didn't know what was going on. But the reality was that this moment in time was a real impetus for me to want to understand more about policing in general, but also policing in Rochester. And one way to do that, and I don't even remember who told me about FOIL, was to file Freedom of Information Law requests. So what are the origins of FOIL and FOIA, right? You've heard of FOIA, Ying? So the Freedom of Information Act, right? This is the federal law that authorizes civilians to access federal government and federal agency information. It also mandated the creation of states across the country developing agencies to do the same thing. It was enacted in 1966. FOIL is the state level agency that was created, or state level law that was created in accordance with the FOIA Act of 1966. It's a New York State law that authorizes civilians to access state and local government information. Anybody. You don't have to be a citizen. You can be from another state and use this law to gain access to information about New York State and the localities, many of them in New York State. And it was enacted in 1974. So what does FOIL, what are we telling people when we say you should go FOIL? Why is this important? The legislature in New York State decided that the people's right to know the process of governmental decision-making and to review the documents and statistics leading to determinations is basic to a democratic society. Access to such information should not be thwarted by shrouding it with the cloak of secrecy and confidentiality, and that the legislature declared that government is the public's business and that the public, individually and collectively represented by a free press, should have access to records of government in accordance with the provisions of this article. So that's really the crux of the New York State law, and why everyone in this room has the ability to go and file FOILs to get information about the things that our governments are doing. Excuse me, I'm going to talk a little bit now about the technicalities, how this stuff works, right? So, and then I'm going to move on to some work I'm engaged in, and then some last tips and tricks for all of you. So all government agencies must produce records if requested under FOIL, unless there's an articulable exemption, right? So what is an agency? This could be a state or municipal department, board, bureau, division, commission, committee, public authority, corporation, council, office, other government entity performing a governmental or proprietary function for the state, municipalities, except, this is the one exception, or two exceptions, the judiciary and the state legislature are exempt from FOIL, which in my mind is a little bit problematic, but I'm gonna leave that there. That's what the law says. So what are the exemptions? If state or federal law prevents disclosure of information, disclosure would be an invasion of personal property. Law enforcement records that reveal confidential sources or would interfere with an ongoing investigation are exempt. Records that could endanger the life or safety of any person. And the trick with FOIL is that it's on the municipality to articulate those exemptions and show directly why the data or the information being requested cannot be released. They can't just say, well, we think that there might be a federal law that's violated by giving this information, so we're not going to give it to you. They have to point out in the federal law, which federal law, and where in the law it says that you can't get that information. What are the costs, right? So any paper, hard copy, cannot be more than 25 cents a page. There's no fees or costs if the compiling of the records takes less than 2 hours. Agencies must provide an estimate of actual costs, itemized list to the requester before they go forward with fulfilling the request. Actual costs do not include search time, administrative costs, or any redaction. And that includes video. So you can't include redacting body-worn camera video from like police officers or surveillance camera footage from government buildings as a actual cost. Actual costs include our hourly staffing costs to prepare the record. So again, if it takes more than 2 hours to prepare the record, then you could be billed for those hours. Storage devices, thumb drives, DVDs, CDs, whatever. Like I've never paid more than $5 for one of those. And sometimes the city just sends them to me for free, which is kind of exciting because then I got another little thumb drive to put in my pile. And sometimes if the records are so large, there's so much data that the municipality needs to hire an outside consultant to actually take the data and organize in the way that you've asked, you can be billed for the time to do that as well. But I mean, you're talking about massive amounts of data, and it would really depend on what data you're looking for. So each agency, each governmental entity in New York State should have rules that they create for how citizens can submit FOIL requests. A lot of agencies accept FOIL requests via email. Monroe County, I believe, still is a written thing. You have to fill out a form and mail it in. The city of Rochester was like that up until about 2013, 14-ish, where I have a whole binder in my house of just FOIL requests I wrote up and sent out. If there's no process or email or mention of FOIL at a government entity or agency, what you can do is write them an email or a letter addressed to the records access officer and include your request in that. And then the agency has to figure out who that sort of records access officer is. Your request is diverted to them and they respond to it. If there's no response in 5 days, you can file an appeal. And this is not a legal thing. You can do it, I can do it. I'm not a lawyer. You can file an appeal on timeliness grounds. The request should be clear and specific, include relevant times, dates, locations, names of persons involved. And if the New York State Committee on Open Government contains all these opinions and advisory opinions and cases that you can go to, and there's an index and you can search the index for the topic you're asking for records on, and you can include those cases that support your request for information. So agencies must respond within 5 days of your initial request. They must either provide the records at that time, provide a written explanation for why they denied your request, again, articulating the exemption that prevents them from disclosing it, or they can send you a reasonable expectation of when the request will be prepared and ready to go out. And if the request is granted and paid for instance, you need to pay $5 to get a CD, they have 20 days to produce it. Again, if the records records are not disclosed within 20 days, they have to give a reasonable estimate of when those records will be ready. So for some of the records I've FOIL over the years have taken me 6 months or a year to get, and every month they'll send me another email saying, yeah, this can take a little longer than we thought, look for it next month. And that's how they do it. So let's say that you get back a response saying it's denied, here's why, here's the articulated reason. You have 30 days from that moment to file an appeal, and that appeal goes to the agency head. And when you appeal, it basically says, I'm appealing because this advisory opinion said that this data was disclosable, or I'm appealing because you didn't articulate why my request was denied, or I'm appealing because, because you didn't get back to me in a timely manner. You didn't give me an updated sense of when this record was going to be prepared. So, you put your name, reference the FOIL number, why you're appealing, what you want, send it to them, and they have 10 days to respond to you. And the records will either be denied again or released. If they are denied, the requester's next sort of administrative remedy is to file what's called an Article 78, which is a lawsuit against the agency saying that they violated your rights by not handing over the information and not, not proving why you couldn't get that data. Excuse me. I drank too much coffee this morning. Let's see here. So Article 78 again, these are challenges to agencies over arbitrary or capricious decisions. And if you substantially prevail in your court case, a lot of times what happens, the law says that the agency is responsible for the fees and fines or whatever that you've incurred by the agency in the process of foiling. And then the records will be released based on the judicial ruling or denied based on the judicial ruling. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. So 2009, I'm arrested. I'm told about FOIL, and I start foiling. And I think I sent like 3 or 4 requests, and I didn't hear anything back. Complete, denial of my rights under FOIL. But I think on the fifth request, I got back an XLS. It's like an email, or I'm trying to think of it. Yeah, I think it was an email, and it was an XLS sheet. I was so stoked. And the reason why I was asking about Rochester Police Department demographics is because I want to answer a very simple question. Are the RPD an occupying force in the city of Rochester? Or do they live here, right? I heard a laugh in the audience. I don't know what that means, but we'll move on, right? So here we go. This is the racial breakdown of the RPD in 2010. So 77% of the force was white, non-Hispanic, 10% white, Hispanic. Black, non-Hispanic were 11%. And then you have Asian, Indian listed as well. And the very small sections, you can see them right here. So that was interesting. This is my pie chart, by the way, one of my first. It's pretty terrible, but I'm very proud of it. Then this is the gender of the police officers in Rochester in 2010. 88% male, 12% female. The number in front of the percentage is the actual raw count. And this is the residency. So 87% do not live in the city of Rochester and 13% did. In 2022, this number is now 95% and 5%. All right, so that was my first foray. And I have to tell you that when I got back that XLS and made those pie charts, I was hooked. My advisor at RIT, when I got my master's degree, tells me, stop foiling and start publishing. What the hell's wrong with you, And I'm trying to follow that advice. I'm actually working on a few things right now. So, but I'm still foiling, of course. I can't stop. It's really terrible. He doesn't like it. All right, so let's talk about the HIT, Highway Interdiction Team. This is a anti-drug task force unit in Rochester's police department that was federally funded in 1986, and then again in 1988, $500,000 of federal money. This is under Ronald Reagan's Anti-Drug Abuse Act, which provided millions and millions of dollars to local police departments around the country, right? And so I foiled for all information on the HIT squad. And I got back the federal application that they submitted. It was crazy. I was like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe I got this. I didn't get this in the application, but this is important, right? This is Rochester's red line neighborhoods. Everybody here familiar with redlining, racialized discrimination, housing, jobs, employment, police abuse. So the city of the center of Rochester is right here. And then you've got the north side, west side, southwest side. Those were the red line neighborhoods. So even if you had resources to move out of those neighborhoods, you were prevented from doing it. Realtors wouldn't show you things outside of those areas if you were Black. If you were able to move out, a lot of the surrounding communities, like Brighton especially, had racialized covenants where brown, Black people were legally excluded from moving there because of the deeds. Anyways, when you look at composite maps of Rochester's crime and violence and police misconduct, this area is really what we're talking about. You don't see it much down here. This area is pretty clear. And then in 2017, maybe it's 2018. No, it must have been, yeah, I'm forgetting when I foiled for that. There's so many foils. Anyways, the data on this side, these are the locations of drug buys what is it? Red is multiple buys and yellow is one buy. And in the application I got through FOIL on the hit squad, these were all the addresses their narcotics units went to prove to the federal government that there was a major drug issue in Rochester. What I think is really interesting about this is University of Rochester is right down here, right? There were no dots in that area, right? Major college campus in Rochester. The southeast, the more affluent green, white part of Rochester, very little, if any, drug crime happening there. But up here, whoa, where the brown and black people live, a lot of drugs, a lot of activity, which again lines up with this. I won't belabor the point anymore. When did I get these? I must have foiled for this stuff in, geez, must have been like 2018, maybe 2017. Subject resistance reports. When the RPD officers go to a scene of a call, they're responding or they're engaging people and they use force, there's a general order that mandates that they have to write about the force they used, why they used it. And these are called subject resistance reports, right? And using FOIL, I got 3,500 of these reports, which I plan to use for a doctoral, dissertation at some point in my life. But they've got the last name, the first name, which are redacted, the date of the incident, the time, the crime report number, sex, race, height, weight, incident location, if they were arrested or not, so they can use force. And this goes from verbal force all the way to deadly force, right? Whether they were arrested or not, the subject's actions, did they verbally resist? Were they passive? Were they active? Were they armed? Were they trying to kill the officer? And then all of the different kinds of use of force that the officer can use, right? And whether they were effective, not effective, or moderately effective. And the order is not the times, but it is the sort of how they applied force in chronological order, and then whether it was effective or not. So this was pretty stunning to get. Also included in each of these 3,500 reports is an officer narrative about the use of force in the incident that they responded to, which when you think about like a textual analysis is just mind-boggling. 3,500 of these things. What do we find? What words, what phrases, what kinds of contexts are officers put into, and how does their state, how's the state of the person they're engaging, etc. Fascinating stuff. It also contains medical information. Were they injured before, during, or after? Were they taken to the hospital? Were they, was pepper spray sprayed in their face? Were they admitted to the hospital? Really fascinating stuff. In 2018, I filed a FOIL for body camera footage. This is an unrelated case to this. And that case eventually resolved 4 years later. The city policy was illegal. This is the city policy. So I submit a FOIL request asking for information about an incident and want the officer's body camera because at this time they had them. And what the city would do is it would send you a blurred image of the video with no sound and then say, tell us what 10 seconds you want and we'll do it for you. But then you have to pay the cost of us doing it. And the cost could be anywhere from like, $25 for an hour's worth of unredacting all the way to like, in my case, $350 just to get a half hour of unredacted footage. And after Judge Taddeo ruled in my favor that the city policy was in violation of FOIL, I submitted another FOIL for this incident. This is a guy, black man riding his bike home from the neighborhood community center, and the police stopped him because he got a report of a black man who had stolen a bike. And the video is sort of terrifying to listen to because this man is doing everything in his power to retain his dignity and to not escalate the situation because he didn't do anything. And I got this after Judge Taddeo's ruling. I got the whole video. The only thing redacted was his name on his ID when the officer looked at it, as well as I think what he said, his address or something, was also redacted. And they give me a redaction log, which is also part of the law. But that was really interesting because up to that point, whenever you would FOIL for this stuff, they would always hide it. Daniel Prude was suffocated by officers in 2020. And an organization called Forsyth Institute came to Rochester about 3 years prior, trained 70 officers in their use of force training, which in my understanding is more like a shoot first, ask questions later kind of thing. And I FOILed for all the information the city had on Forest Science Institute. And I found this PowerPoint presentation that had some interesting stuff. So it's interesting, they say terminology infers risk, choke equals respiratory, and can't read my writing here. Inference, do not use chokehold, choke them out, carbaroid, sleeper hold. Don't use those terms. And then excited delirium, is it a diagnosis or not? Currently not a diagnosis, according to AMA, CMA, DSM-4. Just sort of interesting stuff here. The symptoms of excited delirium may have very hot skin, may not sweat properly, may seem profoundly dry. Apparent superhuman strength, usually require multiple officers. Daniel Prude, the officers were not charged criminally under the Attorney General's investigation because the investigation found, and the grand jury, I should say, that she impaneled found that Daniel Prude's death was not necessarily directly related to the force of the officers, but was in fact related to excited delirium, a very controversial diagnosis, and a small amount of PCP in his system. If you haven't seen the body camera video of that, I highly recommend you check it out. It's horrifying. My interest there was just to find out more about FSI and about excited delirium and what FSI is telling Rochester, the officers, and the state. And then these are some pending FOIL requests that I have out right now. Emails from the Police Accountability Board, RPD files into the killing of Denise Hawkins in 1975, orders of protection against specific officers, a report on the Police Advisory Board from 1964, an FBI report. RPD itemized recruitment budgets and materials, arrest records from the riots of 1964 in Rochester, highway interdiction team complaints. So these are complaints made against the highway interdiction team in the 80s and 90s. And then all maps, descriptions, bulletins, general orders, documentation on police beats from 1940 to 1960. Because again, I can't stop. So here's some tips for doing FOILs, right? Persistence pays off, 110%. That's not statistically possible, but you get what I'm saying. Be courteous. I'm always fascinated by the fact that when I treat people like people, they'll treat me back very nicely. I remember I got some data on the Police Advisory Board from 1963. It was 3 large packets. And this person said, just take them. I don't want to sit here and watch you scan them into your scanner all day. Just take the files. And I was like, really? I'm like, yeah. And that was only because we had a relationship. So it's important to be courteous to the people that are doing this work. Develop a relationship with an attorney. It never hurts to have an attorney in your back pocket if you need to file an Article 78. You're not obligated when you file a FOIL to explain who you are or why you want the data. It's really important. Make sure you're sending your request to the right organization, right agency. Sometimes the agency will be polite and tell you, oh no, we don't hold this information. You need to file over here. Sometimes they don't. Don't be coy, be direct, be specific. Specificity and directness will get you more than trying to skirt the issue of what you're looking for. Cite past opinions and cases from the New York State Committee on Open Government's website. Keep track of your FOIL requests and deadlines. They have deadlines that they have to adhere to. And if they violate those deadlines, you can appeal on timeliness grounds, which the courts have, in my cases, have ruled in favor of. Well, not the courts, but when I appeal, the head of the agencies agree with me that there were timeliness issues and they give me the information. Look at other successful FOIL requests if you're not having luck foiling for something, right? So look around, go Google, go on the internet, you know, figure out what's going on up there, what other people have done. Have there been other cases where somebody's foiled for something that you want in another city in New York State? Find out what their FOIL is and then mimic it for your own city. That's why I got the billing zip codes for all RPD officers in I think it was like 16 or 17. And then finally, there are tons of government agencies and tons of private agencies doing work for governments, right? There are researchers in universities like Alfred doing work on government grants, right? I mean, I'm talking about criminal justice here, but you could really apply this to a lot of different areas. And I think it's worthwhile to think about the work you're doing, what data you could use in your own work, and then what agencies might be able to provide that information. With that, I'll stop. Thank you all so much.
Desmond.
Thank you, Ted, for your presentation. Could you talk a little bit about the FOIL law here in New York State and why the state judicial system and the state legislature were exempted from FOIL requests?
You know, that's a really good question. I think because the legislature enacted this, they didn't want their dirty laundry aired. That's my personal opinion. I don't have a direct opinion on that or an evidentiary opinion on that. The courts have always been held to a more secretive standard in New York State. And I think that when the legislature passed this, there's always sort of backroom dealings going on. So I imagine that the courts were also excluded based on their role in society. But I don't have a solid answer for that. I'm sorry.
Mallory.
Thanks, Ted. This is sort of a yes or no question, but the answer is yes. I've got a follow-up. Are the FOIL denials public information, like the rationale or explanations that you get? Are those available to us?
The city, so yes and no. The city used to have like a reading room where you could go and look at all the FOILs that have been filed, and I think they included denials there. But then the city very recently updated their whole FOIL system, and that whole reading room was taken away. So I can show you all of my denials, but that's all I can offer you. Yeah.
Have you noticed any trends in the denials or?
I have not done any kind of scientific analysis of my FOIL denials, but that's a great project that I definitely need to get onto at some point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Paul.
Thanks, Ted. Do you know, do the rules and legislation about freedom of information requests in New York State, do they differ significantly from other states? Does this tend to be the case across the country, or are there significant differences state to state?
Each state has variations on this law. Like the FOIA, the federal law, sort of lays out basically what the states have to do to be in compliance, but how that's done differs. So like I had a guy from Kentucky ask me about how to FOIL from things, and I was like, I've only FOILed from New York, so let me find the Kentucky law. And the Kentucky law is written very differently from the New York State law, although the same sort of general principles apply. So to your question, the answer is that there is variation, and it becomes incumbent on the researcher to understand sort of the open records request laws of the specific states that they're interested in getting data from.
Ted, I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any restriction on who can request this information, like in terms of people's age, or whether they are citizens or resident of the US or anything like that?
No, anybody could do it.
Anyone,
you are under no
anywhere
obligation.
in the world?
Yeah, and you are under no obligation to explain who you are or why you want the data or what you're going to use the data for, which is so cool. I don't have to write long-winded emails about why I'm such a great guy and how you should give me the information. I just like ask them. I'm like, I want this, and if you don't give it to me, I have a lawyer who will sue you on my behalf. So let's go. Let's tango. Yeah, no, there's really not, and that's the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a law protecting the transparency of the population to the government.
Mallory.
Got another one. So
Okay.
these people you've worked with, like I was imagining as I was listening to you, my relationship to archivists and archives, and it's a real like kind of mystery tour, and it does help to get to know the archivists and let them get to know you, but it seems all less direct because again, it's kind of a detective story in the archive, but what you're describing sounds just more already cataloged. And I was just wondering if you would talk about your relationship to those people and the process and what they're like and what their job is like, I guess, if you could tell me.
Yeah, that's a good, I mean, so the city of Rochester has an archive. It's actually in a warehouse near a fire station downtown. And I've been to it once. And I was foiling for this report from 1976. And before I submitted the foil, I was told, oh, go talk to the archivist. And I went down and talked to her. And she's like, yeah, I think I got it right here, but I can't give it to you without a foil request. I was like, what? It was the weirdest thing. I was like, all right. So I foiled the request and I came down and I got it like the next week, and it was fine. Amalia, this other person I've met with in the office, in the communications office at the time, because now it's changed to the law department. Sorry, more internal dynamics of Rochester. She would get FOIL requests and she would do her best to fulfill them. And she, every time I would send a request, it would always go to her. So she was like she was the person in the office that got all of my requests. And so over time, like if I had questions, I would email her, I'd reach out, I'd ask her for clarification. And that paid off, I think. We had an amicable relationship. I was never mean to these people. They're just clerks. They're doing their jobs. It doesn't make sense to be rude or, nasty. You just, treat them like they are people, and because they are people, treat them as you would your mother. And, they'll be far more likely to help you out than, telling them that they're the problem with government and they're the, I think about like the ballot, the elections and the ballot workers, and there's all of this animosity toward ballot workers in the country. And I'm just like, oh, this is ugly. Like they don't sign up for this stuff. They don't want to get death threats. Like it's just a bad deal. So yeah, I think being really, kind, considerate. I always say, thank you for, your time and consideration with this request. I look forward to your response. It's just sort of a tagline I put at the end because I want to acknowledge, I know you're just doing this work because you're getting paid and this is your job. And this is not like you trying to foist a government conspiracy on me because you aren't giving me the information I want, which is also true, right? It's not like if they don't have the information or they can't find it, that it's somehow it's a conspiracy against me. Who the hell am I? I'm nobody. Although in recent years, I've found out that my name precedes me when I do file FOIL requests, which is funny, but that's a separate matter entirely. But yeah, I think it's just, I think a lot of times they're overworked. A lot of times they don't know. And they're dealing not just with my criminal justice requests, but they're dealing with all kinds of other requests. It could be about there was a pothole here and I want to know when the last time it was checked, my son got into a car crash and I want the medical records, right? So then they have people sending them FOILs that don't even relate to the government institution. They have to deny them and then send them somewhere else, So I have a lot of feelings for those folks. And I think it makes much more sense to become ingratiated to them than to, burn that bridge because you think they're part of the problem.
Ted, we have a couple of questions from the chat.
Okay.
Bob Powell asks, is the military exempt from foiling? How about what used to be local draft boards?
That's a really good, I've never foiled. I guess in that case, you'd be FOIA-ing because it's a federal agency, the US military. But yeah, they're not exempt. You can foil or FOIA for them. I FOIA'd the FBI before. If the draft board, local draft boards are closed, you want to get records on those. They might be archived somewhere, but I'm not sure where. But yeah, going to the branch of the military or the recruitment webpage and seeing what they have for FOIL might be a good start.
Question from Mark Klingensmith. Public comments submitted to an NYS agency on regulations published in the New York State Register don't appear to be generally made available. Have you made FOIL requests for public comments? Were they successful?
It's interesting. I've never made a public request for public comments. So no, I don't know. And if they aren't accessible, I'd want to know why. Like, that's the thing, that it's on the agency or the municipality to explain why it's not, why it's exempt.
Use the microphone.
You've been talking to a certain extent in generalities about the use of the law. I'm going to ask you to kind of deal with it in a much more specific way. And my question then is, you refer to the Daniel Prude case. Now, I don't know whether everyone here is familiar with the Daniel Prude case. If you come from Rochester, obviously you are, but for others, I don't know. So you might want to say something about that. But the question I'm posing then is, all right, Daniel Prude died after an arrest as a result of, or at least connected to, allegations about the way in which he was treated by the police. So you put in a FOIA request. What exactly are you looking for? And not only what are you looking for, but in light of the fact that you have used FOIA, what did you find? What did you find that you didn't expect to find? Can you give us a little more specificity about the whole Daniel Prude issue and its relationship to FOIA?
Sure, yeah. So Daniel Prude was having some sort of a mental health situation. He ran away from his brother. He was naked. It was like, I want to say November. It was snowing out. He smashed a window with his arm. Police surrounded him. Like, there was like 6 or 7 officers. He was handcuffed, naked on the street. And then finally, he started spitting at the officers and just sort of talking in gibberish. So put a spit sock on his head, and then he was sort of, a little bit after that, he was wrestled to the ground. It looked like a knee was put onto his back. And he suffered, it was like a stroke or a heart attack. In that moment, he was unresponsive. He went to the hospital, he was put on life support, and he died a week later. There's body-worn camera footage of his arrest out in the public. You can Google it. This happened at the tail end. This became public at the tail end of the George Floyd protests at the end of 2020 in Rochester, and people kept coming out, I think, every night for another 2 or 3 months until maybe December, demanding justice for what they saw was police murdering another Black person, and this time in Rochester. So in 2017, the Forest Science Institute came to Rochester to give a training on use of force. And there's been a lot of newspaper articles and some academic research around Forest Science Institute and their processes for how they train officers. And what they tend to do is they'll show a video of, say, Walter Scott. This is a man, I think, in Georgia or the South, who was walking and gets shot in the back by the officer when he starts to run away. And the Forest Science Institute would take that video and go frame by frame to explain to the officers in the room why the shooting was justified, right? And so Forest Science Institute came to Rochester to train rank and file officers and also command level officers. And the payment for the command level officers came out of taxpayer funds. The 70 rank and file officers who were trained came out of union funds. So there was pushback publicly when city council said, well, we'll pay for these command level officers to get this training. And that was a red flag for us. So we wrote a letter, we made some hay about it, and eventually city council rescinded that money. I say that to say that in 2020, one of Daniel Prude's death was ruled homicide by way of asphyxiation, excited delirium, and PCP. They found a little bit of that in his blood. And so my interest in foiling for Forest Science Institute was to understand what the training was that these 70 officers got back in 2017. And if the officers in 2017 were the same officers that got the training, were involved in the Daniel Prude's death. So that's my like sort of thinking about why am I foiling for this. What I got back was a number of files, I think maybe like close to 300 files. And it included things I wasn't expecting, like certificate of completions for different officers. It included that force science training, use of force PDF on the slides that they used for the training. It included communications with members at Department of Criminal Justice Services in New York State about how FSI could work with them to develop curriculum and train officers across New York State. So what became apparent to me was this wasn't just a local phenomenon, but this was actually a statewide, state codified kind of relationship. And that it wasn't just impacting Rochester, but it was impacting municipalities around the state. And so not all of that has become public, just because I've been, like I said before, my advisor tells me stop foiling and start publishing. But I think that that's essentially what I foiled for, was all communication with the city of Rochester and Forest Science Institute. And that was some of the information I got back, which I found startling, but also fascinating and terrifying, I guess, in some ways.
Ted.
Yes. Yes. Terrifying in that this organization, pseudoscientific organization, has such deep roots in state institutions and can get its trainings administered to municipalities seemingly around the state whenever they want. That's what I mean by terrifying.
Ted, we have time. One very quick question.
Yes.
From the chat. Also from Mark Klingsmith again. He says, it seems like New York state agencies should voluntarily and as a general rule be publishing any and all information of public interest. Has FOIL increased the propensity for agencies to keep information from the public and just wait for a FOIL request?
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't seen any sort of scientific evidence either way on that, but I can say that in terms of in terms of like, you know, anything that you deem interesting that the government has its hands in is something that you could get. So can the government just publish everything that everybody wants? Not necessarily. So they wait for the requests to come in. But I also think that in my experience and in other people's experience, at least in Rochester, what they do is they don't respond, or they deny you first and hopefully you'll go away, right? That's why I said persistence is one of the keys to doing good foiling, because if you keep coming at them, you keep persisting, eventually they come down, they relent. That's why I got that wonderful demographic data from 2010. So yes and no, I guess, is the answer to that question.
We're out of time. If you have more questions for Ted, please come to the front and he's here available. Meanwhile, let's thank him again for a very informative talk.
Thank all of you for listening. I really appreciate it.